I'm not really of your ilk. I'm not going to use a PowerPoint presentation, but I am going to comment on them. I'm going to give you 16 points in 15 minutes. But if you've read the presentation secrets of Steve Jobs, who was a great speaker, he would know that he would say that PowerPoint presentations are very tired. You know, you are not meant to use them very often. And if you do use them, one of the cardinal sins of using a slide presentation is that you never, ever, ever read what is on your slide, because it insults your audience, as if they aren't smart enough to read it themselves. That's for the future. And the third point would be to never read from a script. And I am going to break that third point to some degree right now. I'm actually going to be a little bit random. I'm going to read from some points and then go random. I am not an academic. I don't have a PhD, and I find all of you irritatingly smart. So if you wouldn't mind, just lower your expectations. And now, lower them some more. You remember yesterday when Gerald Torres, he came up here and he recapped yesterday, the day before, in this incredibly brilliant and articulate way, and he said he started thinking about it about 5 minutes into his granola. Were you here for that? And so guess what I ate for breakfast this morning? And seriously, I mean, I stared down at that granola, and I thought, I'll have what he's having. But I didn't get that great, the great insights that I think that he just comes up with. And I think that you all come up with. You're incredibly smart. You're, in fact, an incredibly intimidating group, and I am in awe of you and your ability to learn and have discourse and discuss. And oh my God, to sit around a table with all of you is to make me feel very insecure inside. I don't know most of you, but I know that the big difference between you and me and the many of the people that we talked about over the last few days is that you've chosen to work in this field. And I call that the luxury of choice. And it's kind of like the pursuit of happiness, and it's a phenomenon that is not universally shared. You know, in the United States, we're one of the few countries that we can actually pursue happiness. It's written into the Declaration of Independence. And we have, if we're lucky enough, to have that luxury of choice. And sadly, those people who are most typically impacted by climate and by negative environmental impacts are poor. And they have no such luxury. They're the underserved, and they have no other options in life. It's them, and it's not us. And it's that way, at least for now. So it gives us that great luxury to think about these things and talk about these things, and that's great from a distance. And I know that's hard to keep into context as we pursue our work, our meaningful work, but it's a good idea to keep trying and to keep perspective. And to remember not how smart you are, but how fortunate you are to get to spend your life thinking about the world's big problems, rather than trying to survive day in and day out as life beats the crap out of you. And I'm grateful for that daily, all the time, and I encourage you to do the same. So you heard a bit about me, and just in terms of why I'm here, I have been working in conservation for a long time, for about 30 years now. I started the Rainforest Alliance when I was 24, just out of college, and I've been working on biodiversity conservation for a long time. And the Rainforest Alliance has grown. We are a total startup organization. We now work in over 100 countries. We have over 400 staff people. We have 13 offices, and we're doing a lot of work around the world on sustainability and how do you get to sustainability. And it's pretty cool that we've grown. And then I remain involved with the Rainforest Alliance and moved over to the OverBrook Foundation. So I spent half of my life as an activist and working in an organization, half of my life, professional life, as a grant maker. At OverBrook, we have an endowment of about $165 million, and we give out grants in human rights and the environment. We're very progressive. And we like to look at tipping points and ways that we can try and make different kinds of change. Related to you all, we worked with the mayor's office to help create and fund the New Yorker's contribution to a greener and greater city behavioral impact study. And that study is a few years old, I think like 3 years old now, but just last week it went up online and was made available to the public. And who says governments aren't efficient? I mean, it's only been 3 years, and it's probably out of date. And I kind of think of myself, I would have been an entrepreneur, but I guess sort of a social entrepreneur in that I try and look at ways that we can do the change, and make things happen. And now the main focus of our work at OverBrook in our program is to, it's a little tiny program to try and get the 16,000 plus environmental organizations that work domestically in the US to work together better. The project believes that it's possible for there to be one environmental movement. Imagine that, one environmental movement. You might think what a movement is, but I think if you talk to different people within the environmental community, they're going to describe it very differently. And movements are meant to move, actually, to go to different places and make progress. And we're working toward that. And when I say environment, I've heard people talk about what environment means and doesn't mean here, but environmental, I mean grassroots, environmental justice, climate justice, food and food justice, policy, etc. This effort is about bringing equity and alignment to a greater movement, and it's inclusive for everybody, and that means all of you and everyone who works in a field that is related. Because unless we are able to come up with a greater sense of self, that big self, I don't know if we're going to be able to move. Okay, so if you don't mind, would you just close your eyes for just a second? We will not be doing meditation, but I really did enjoy that. Okay, if you close your eyes, imagine that you've just been given a free trip to Griff-Zomada. Congratulations, you're going to Griff-Zomada, but you have no idea what Griff-Zomada is, where it is, if it's a good place or if it's a bad place, if it's hot or if it's cold, how you get there, can you Google it, what are your expectations, and what are those expectations based on? So typically in our world, when you close your eyes or when you imagine some place, you have expectations. They're often not meant, but you can experience it. Okay, so if you can open your eyes now, and if you're thinking about Griff-Zomada, you're going to start to probably being smart. You're going to go, well, I hear Gryffindor in there, so maybe this is a Harry Potter related place. I heard a Zoe in there, so maybe there's a Greek meaning about life, and I don't really know. Okay, now just close your eyes for one more second. So now just imagine sustainability. You're going to the land of sustainability. Can you imagine it? Can you see the path to get there? Okay, that was my little exercise. I'm going to guess that most of you could not imagine the path to sustainability. And like Griff-Zomada, if you can't picture it, if you can't get a sense of the pathways to get there, what it should look like and how to get there, how are we, in fact, to get there? And we can study all we want about what is currently going on, but we're going to need to look outward, look into the future, and figure out the kind of world that we want to live in, and then imagine the pathways to get there if we want to be able to envision it. Yesterday, one of the speakers sort of downplayed future planning because it is, in fact, hard to tell the future. But what I heard here this week from all of you was that we need hope and vision and a sense to get to a better world. And I wonder why more of us aren't in that world, in that field generally. The greater examining, the artists and the writers and the dreamers, and what would it take to envision a positive future instead of a negative future? Imagine a world, those whose jobs it was to imagine a world that looked like that so we could live like that. And I think that's where we're going to need to get to. And Wade Davis did a little bit of that. Wade Davis had amazing photos of better places that he'd been to just to piss us off. I want to go there. He did a lot. That guy has done some amazing traveling. This is the 12th time I've been to the plains of Tibet. But the other reason, sorry, I'm not envious of him. I don't want that job for National Geographic to be the resident explorer. The other reason was to make these places seem real to us, to tell us a story. Because as he said, storytellers change the world. If there was one common stream throughout this meeting that I heard, and I was listening, I really was, it was about storytelling. From the actual use of the device to the speakers who reported back on their work to change behavior and how they did it. They told us their stories of work and life of experience. And of course, obviously, the better the narrative, the more compelling the story. The better you use your PowerPoints, the more people are going to be able to listen. The more likely we are going to be able to keep people engaged and to get them to change. I forgot to give you my points. I'm now on my 6th point, and this is change. Change was a word that was used here a lot. This is from my notes. Be the change. Change starts with you. Change starts at home. Durable social change. Change comes from within. Change makers. All change is conflict. Change the wind, not the politicians who are following which way the wind blows. In order to make change, we have to suspend belief. Change is not a threat to culture. Power is the threat. And, of course, climate change. Now, I attended this meeting here 2 years ago, and the focus was so much more on government and policy. And this meeting, we hardly talked about that at all. And I can't tell if that's about despair, it's a mindset change, if it's about victory, if it's about failure. And this meeting was so much more about it focused inward, about the local, the individual, the community. Change begins at home. It's really fascinating, the changes within just those 2 years. It's kind of like think globally, act locally. And I just made that up. If in fact you want to cite this for the future, reference my name, please. Okay, point 7 was what this means. And I think for all of you, if there could be a takeaway, it would be to get out of your comfort zone and know you are not out of it now. Anthropologists talking to psychologists does not constitute big change. It does not mean you are out of your comfort zone, even though I have heard you all talking about that this week. And I heard about how psyched you were to be in such a diverse crowd. And it was so refreshing for you to get out of your little ivory tower. And that's not what this is. I don't think that's the kind of change that is going to be necessary to get to that bigger change. And that leads to what we mean by diversity. And we've talked a lot about diversity. And I could talk about biodiversity for hours. I love biodiversity. The species that make up this planet. It's just so, no way, can I have 3 minutes? Okay, I'm going to go really fast now because I'm on point 8. I have to get to 16. Okay. Diversity can make you really uncomfortable. And diversity at the same time is the spice of life. And however you define diversity, however it's going to appeal to you, get out of your comfort zone. But as my good buddy Annie Leonard says, she's the person who did the story of stuff, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We all need to reach out and touch someone very different from ourselves. And that doesn't mean driving through a neighborhood with the windows up. It means getting to success and getting to a different place in a non-academic world is going to mean taking risks and redefining what diversity means and acting upon that. And it's going to look really different. Okay, my next point is 10. What does it mean? It means we all need to think we're hungry for some type of change. Change got 2 bullet points because it's so big and it's so dangerous. And it's especially dangerous to people who have power. We have power. And if you ask yourself, what are we really willing to give up for just change or just a little change? And who really decides what is just and what is just change? And how will you feel if you're not the decider, but others decide for you what that change looks like? How uncomfortable will it make you to put yourself in that position? And change occurs in many unpredictable ways. And as the saying goes, people plan, God laughs. So you never know. 11, language. It's great that so little time here was spent discussing climate deniers. That, too, was a big topic a couple of years ago, but that's no longer enough. Now we need to educate folks about mitigation, resilience, mitigation, adaptation, and now preparedness. Okay, I can barely say preparedness. It just doesn't come out of my mouth. And I feel like we need to, maybe, a part of our work needs to be talking to people who work in marketing, because preparedness to me sounds like one of the things I'm going to have to take once I get a little older and things aren't functioning so well. or something a Boy Scout should practice all the time. But are we really going to use preparedness in our daily vocabulary? 12, the canaries. I'm almost done. We heard about the canaries in the coal mine more than once, and the canaries symbolize those who have no power. When things are not working for them, it's a good bet things are simply not working. But does that stir other people to action? What's it going to take to really stir you to action? And is divesting from fossil fuel funds really going to be the most that we can do? How comfortable are you with our current to-do list for reducing greenhouse gases? And what's on your to-do list? And how much of it is your academic to-do list versus your own to-do list? And I know that we're looking inward and we want to make change. This is what we talked about so much here. But how do you pass that along? And that leads to 13, which is culture. No matter how good your ideas are, no matter how excellent your proposal or your plan is, if you don't have buy-in from people, you got nothing. Business guru Peter Drucker said correctly that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And in my world, I've seen this to be the case over and over and over again. The best energy efficiency tool is never going to get used unless communities understand why they're using it and what's in it for them. Peter Drucker also had people have these pilgrimages to him. He's this great business manager, and he would greet them, and I've been told this story, he would greet them at the door, these corporate CEOs, and he'd say, "What did you stop doing this year?" Instead of starting new efforts, I think it's important for all of us to think about what we can stop doing and what we shouldn't be doing. And for me, this leads into waste. If we could just stop wasting the energy waste, the packaging waste, the food waste, we would go so far about having the need to build new things, we could just reduce the clutter, the waste of the old, and reuse them. The future. Tomorrow's world may look very different. My 13-year-old doesn't even use email because it's too slow. And he doesn't use Facebook because it's passé. But he complains that his 9-year-old sister has been exposed to too much technology already, and most of her friends already have iPhones and Instagram accounts. When I started the Rainforest Alliance in 1986, we didn't have computers. We used a word processor. Many of you here have probably never even used one of those. The future does not belong to us. It belongs to our children and their children. I don't want my kids growing up believing there's no hope for the future and that we're going to hell in a handbasket. Positive visions are not just important, they're psychologically critical. Plus, I honestly believe the next generation is going to do a much better job taking care of the planet. And I encourage all of you to spend more time working with the crowd that is 25 and under. They deserve a fighting chance. Spend more time helping young people get ready to take over. We have a long way to go, and this is a marathon. And then lastly, I want you to, oh no, it's 15 out of 16. Almost done. I want you to recognize how far we've actually come. I remember in 1989, I was in Washington, D.C. for a conference, and I was in the Senate, the basement of the Senate, and there was this young senator from Tennessee giving a talk on climate change, and that was Al Gore. And, nobody talked about climate change back then. It was pretty amazing. I couldn't get businesses to talk about sustainability back then at all. But a few weeks ago, at a dinner with corporate CEOs, these corporate CEOs were getting excited about the prospect of making their companies carbon net positive. Net positive. I mean, that's exciting. In 25 years, there's no way I could have thought that we would have come this far in getting the public to have certain beliefs and values about sustainability. So when you get downtrodden or feeling, crappy about how much further we have to go, we have come so far in the last 25 years. I would argue that within the last 2 years, when I last came here, we have made incredible leaps and bounds. The level of discourse here in this room is much more sophisticated and mature, and I congratulate you all for that. Then lastly, try and see every full moon. Stop and check them out. They only come once every month, and it's really amazing. When I miss a full moon, and I live in the city, so often the lights block them out, but when I get to see a full moon, I am so incredibly grateful. Right? It's an amazing thing to get to see. I love all the phases of it, but that full moon's pretty remarkable. And laugh a lot. As I heard here, if it's not fun, it's not sustainable. And we are all incredibly lucky to be alive right now, which we've heard again. Enjoy your life with purpose and laughter. This is like the valedictorian part, but I'm ending. and spend a lot of time with your trusted networks. Again, lines that I've heard here. And as was mentioned yesterday afternoon with a question, do it all with gratitude and humility, especially you academics. You're all doing amazing work and your commitment is heartening. Okay, last thing, take a second, now pat the person next to you on the back, because we don't often get gratitude, we don't often get the good work, the great, and thank them. Really, you know, you're doing amazing work. So I thank you all, and everybody, you know, we all have to do more thanking of the great work because we don't recognize it. And then lastly, I'd say we should thank all the great people at Garrison who have hosted us here today, including those who prepared our meals and cleaned up after us, to the organizers. It's a beautiful day, it's an amazing room, and you're a great group of people. Thank you.